My name is Sam Smee and I work for Muirs. I'm getting used to saying that now, but it's good to be part of the Muir network in name. I am an agronomist and I specialise in cherries. So today and the next half hour, we're just going to be talking about crop nutrition, especially crop nutrition growing under covers. But also having a look at the roots and the root development in the mound. So what happens when we put a cover over a crop? The main thing is we get an increase in relative humidity. Often we think it's temperature. You walk into a cover block and you feel so much hotter. And yes, it is a little bit hotter, but mostly that is for perceived temperature because the relative humidity goes up. And, we've done a lot of work here in Tasmania as well as over in Europe and South America. It's the relative humidity can be up to, I threw it out to Dukes, he didn't even reply, probably 30 to 50% higher. So we get a massive increase in relative humidity when we're growing under covers. So what does that mean for the trees and growing the crop? One of the main issues that we see, and I'll relate it back to crop nutrition, is that we've got a lot of relative humidity. The trees aren't need to be transpiring as much. So transpiring, losing water through the leaves, and so their water requirement is greatly reduced. And we might think, hey, that's fantastic. We don't need to irrigate as much. We don't need to be paying for as much water. We don't need to be spending money on diesel or electricity. And yes, they are some benefits. And we've proven that under rain covers, we need to be reducing our irrigation requirement by at least 50%, if not more. And that's a huge issue that we need to get into our heads. Once we put a cover over top of our trees, you need to be reducing your irrigation requirement by a lot. And I would suggest to all of you, if you're going to put a rain cover on, make sure you've got some soil moisture probes in place to help you make those decisions about when you need to water. So that is absolutely critical. We've had too many situations here in Tas where growers have put rain covers over the top and then kept watering as normal. And what happens is you just end up with these big water balloons that do not last post-harvest. So what happened? So what does that mean in terms of crop nutrition when we're basically reducing the amount of water that's travelling from the soil through the roots, through the trunk, up into our leaves and our fruit? What travels with water? Call it out, come on. What travels with water? Mineral salts. It's our food. It's the nutrients that the trees need, that the fruit needs to develop and grow good quality fruit. So if we've reduced our water requirement and our water that's moving up by 50%, surely it means that we're reducing our nutrient availability by 50%. And look, that's a very simplistic way of saying it. There is active processes that the trees can use to move nutrients around the tree, but that is a much slower process and it requires energy. If a tree's only got the same amount of energy, it's going to run out if it's using that active processes 100% of the time. Most of the nutrients do need to move into the tree and up into the fruit via that passive process of water movement via the xylem. So how can we counteract that? The number one thing is try to reduce our relative humidity as much as possible. And Andrew gave a great summary of that before. Having a covering system that is vented as much as possible, having areas where there's no covers, so over the laneways, having a nice open canopy, you know, reducing hedgerows at the bottom of it and the top of the orchard so you get airflow. Whatever we can do to reduce, you know, increase that airflow, move that humidity out of the orchard is going to help. But we can only do so much to reduce our humidity levels. You know, and beyond that, you've just got to accept that you're growing in a higher humidity environment. So what are some practical things we can do to make sure that we're still getting the same amount of nutrients up into our fruit? And I see it as, you know, I've had this sort of thought in my mind of, well, if you're moving you know, 50% of the water, maybe you should be concentrating nutrients in that water. I'm not saying concentrating, you know, so it's a toxic dose, but we need to be increasing the amount of available nutrients that are flowing, that are, you know, in the soil moisture and available to be taken up. So how do we do that? So I think one of the ways that we can do that is to switch from a system of putting the majority of our nutrients on the ground as a base fertilizer, and switching over to getting our nutrient balances right in the soil, and then growing our crop with predominantly fertigation. The benefits of fertigation is that you can apply nutrients at the correct time to match your fruit development. And also you can manipulate the levels based on your crop load. So as opposed to putting everything on at the start of a season and then having a frost event that wipes your crop out, and then the trees go, hey, I've got a fantastic level of nutrients, I'm just going to grow a massive amount of wood. We can go, well, we've only got a low crop this year, we're reducing our nutrient requirement, and we're putting out our fertigation to match that. So starting off, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we are a little bit out of time here. So starting off our season, what are we going to be doing? So soil testing back in autumn, and do that early. You know, get that out of the way with early in the season so that you can make those amendments early on. So soil testing back in autumn, see what the soil needs to be in balance, and then you maybe applying some, you know, some phosphorus, some potassium, magnesium to get those levels in balance. You're not necessarily looking to grow the crop, but you're making sure that everything is in balance, and obviously adjusting your pH at the same time with lime if required. But then you're getting that on early, so it's washed into the soil. I mean, you can see here, Andrew's spread some base fertilizer fairly recently. You know, and he said he's going to be putting the covers up next week. If he doesn't get some decent rains between now and then, that's going to still be there at the end of the season. So we've got to make sure that we've got our base fertilizer on a lot earlier than in a non-covered situation. So then if you've got your covers out from bloom onwards, and you know, this is a frosty area, as Andrew said, he's going to be putting these covers out next week to minimise frost. And this is a Vaughan system, highly effective in reducing our frost risk. And these covers will be out from bloom until, you know, right up until harvest, and then we'll be wrapping them up as soon as possible after that. So we're not getting any nutrients washed into the soil via the rainfall. So we've got to be relying on fertigation to feed our crop. So once the covers are out, I'm suggesting that we concentrate on calcium. As we heard yesterday, calcium must go into the fruit early. It has to. Later on, it does not move into the fruit. There's no point fertigating calcium later on in fruit development. You've got to get it in early. And the main reasons for that is that vascular connection, the xylem vessels, they clog up with pectins, they actually physically break as the fruit develops. So it's pretty much from straw colour onwards, the xylem system becomes defunct. You're not moving any more calcium into the fruit via the roots. You've got to get it in early. So calcium early, and I'm suggesting maybe you don't put potassium on early because they're going to interact, they're going to outcompete each other. But the benefit with, well, the good thing about potassium is that it can be redistributed in the plant via the phloem system, the sap system. So we can take up potassium, it can move out into the leaves, and then later on in fruit development, from straw colour onwards up until harvest, you can move it into the fruit right up until the day of harvest. Now, you all know what the different nutrients do. Now, calcium is king for firmness, although that study that Claire did didn't quite show that, but there's plenty of studies to show that it did. Calcium is king for firmness. Potassium doesn't really add that much in terms of, it's in the fruit, absolutely, but it's not a structural element. It facilitates some biological reactions to improve, skin color and flavor, but its main function is the movement of sugars out of a leaf and into the fruit. It's almost like, the fuel in a pump to do that. And we know that if we've got low levels of potassium, we're going to have low levels of sugar in our fruit. So think calcium early and potassium late. You can only achieve that undercovers with fertigation. You can't do it by dumping it all on the ground as lime or calcium nitrate or gypsum at the start of a season, washing it all in, because then we're all competing. In a wet season, in a cold season, and you've got your covers out, you still need to be fertigating. The trees still need to be drawing up nutrients. And a lot of growers here in Tas are now moving to almost like a hydroponic system where they're fertigating, from blossom onwards, but just small amounts of fertigation with food in there that the trees can uptake to develop that fruit. So calcium early, potassium late. Magnesium is needed in much smaller levels. Magnesium it is important for fruit quality, but the majority of it is needed for photosynthesis, healthy green leaves. And of course, photosynthesis is using the energy of the sun to create sugars. We need magnesium early, but it's important, especially with a big crop load, to keep supplying it throughout the season, just in low levels, so that we make sure that all the leaves we produce have got adequate levels of photosynthesis, so they're producing carbohydrates right the way throughout the season. Phosphorus is needed early for stimulating energy production and that initial root flush, but only at small levels. And most orchards, especially this orchard here, it's got huge amounts of phosphorus in it. Phosphorus can be highly unavailable, so you've got to have that as a consideration too. But maybe your fertigation program might be just applying a highly available form of phosphorus in terms of, I'd suggest an ammonium polyphosphate, but only small levels. So you can have a look at this handout now. I'm moving along fairly quickly because we are running out of time, as I said. So if you look at the bottom Derwent Valley table there, this was actually done in a hop crop. Hops, it's a perennial crop like cherries. Derwent Valley for those of you who don't know it, it's a fairly arid environment, low rainfall. But you can see there, so what we've done is we've taken a soil test at 0 to 15 centimetres, 15 to 30, and then 30 to 45 centimetres. And our aim was just to see what happens with the nutrients when we apply it to the soil surface. And in this situation, what can you see? What's the trend there? Exactly right. The majority of the nutrients have been stratified. They've been concentrated in that top 15 centimetres of the soil. So I thought that was fascinating when we did that study, and because you know this has been a hop field for 150 years plus. You know, it's a long-term perennial crop. I'm not saying it's the same crop. You know, it does get rotated, but it's similar to cherries and apples. It's a long-term perennial crop.
Sam, so we don't see organic matter or carbon levels, so presumably they concentrate at 5 centimetres.
Yeah, look, there's only so much I can fit on a piece of paper, Dukes. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, 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 yep, yep. But then I thought, well, let's do the same. Let's do the same experiment here. So we're at the shed block. You've just come from a link road. So again, we took some soil samples from the different levels, 0 to 15, 15 to 30, 30 to 45. And we can see here in the shed block what happens. So again, we are seeing a concentration in that topsoil, about top 15 centimetres. So I just thought this was really fascinating that, you know, a lot of the nutrients are just, they're in that, you know, that's 15 centimetres. It's very, very close to the surface. So what we've also done here is dug some soil pits to find out where actually the roots are. So the first thing that you can see is we've got fairly limited topsoil here. You know, Andrew has mounded this up. You know, I mean, we've almost got no topsoil in the interrow here. He's put all of the topsoil up on the mound, and you can see, you know, we're at 40 centimetres. We're into rock. We're into heavy clay. You know, I stopped digging there because I couldn't dig anymore. We didn't find any roots down there. All of the roots are concentrated in this top 20 centimetres. The other thing this shows is this has been root pruned. So this is a lapins on colt. It's coming into its first year of bearing. And it's pretty vigorous. So Andrew decided to root prune this, and this was root pruned back in February. So you can see here where the root pruner knife has come along, and it's come along and root pruned here. So that's about, what would you say? It's about 600 mils out, maybe 700 mils out from the trunk. These roots here haven't been cut. And when James and I were digging the pit, we thought, well, why not? Why not? I mean, we thought maybe it was a big rock there, so the knife bounced out. But then we thought, well, there's a stay-by there. So maybe the operator has come in, he's avoided the stay-wire, and then the knife has started to come in here and progressively got lower, because you can see these roots here, they've been cut. And I can assure you, I didn't do it with my spade, just for the purposes of this exercise. These haven't been cut, and these have been cut. So we can see these roots, they're heading out into the interrow. You know, they're not very big at this stage, it's still a fairly young tree. But these roots are heading out into the interrow. You know, they're harvesting a lot of nutrients, but they're going to be harvesting a lot of water. So what happens when these covers are out? It's a Vaughan system. All of the water is being directed here. What happens when we get a big dump of rain, or even a small dump of rain? this gets concentrated. This is saturated with water. The roots take it up, massive amount of water, and what happens to the fruit? It splits. So fruit split is not just caused by the water on the surface of a fruit being uptaken. It's caused by a lot of water moving up from the roots up into the fruit. So root pruning, it not only slows the tree down in terms of devigorating them, but it's potentially a highly effective tool to reduce fruit splits in a rain protected situation. So the idea of root pruning is to devigorate these trees, and we can see how it's going to be doing that, because these roots here, effectively, these roots will still be feeding out here. We've reduced the amount of soil area that these roots can be drawing nutrients from by potentially a half. So this is going to be highly effective in devigorating these trees. So this was done in February this year. What happens later on to those roots? So let's move over to this site here. So same rootstock, it's an occult rootstock. That's Lappin's. This is an old Samba, and this was root pruned a year prior to that side. So when we dug the pit, it was quite hard to see where the root pruner went along. We believe it was around here. Again, same, about 600 mils out. And we hit this big root here, which is alive. And we thought, maybe he hasn't root pruned, maybe this got forgotten about, or that root's grown back. I don't think that root would have grown back in 18 months. So I think, maybe there was a big rock and that root was missed. But these roots here, they're dead. So I'm thinking the root pruner came through here and it's killed these roots all there. You can see these ones here, they're nice and young and fibrous. They're going to be fantastic for taking up nutrients, especially calcium. Calcium needs to be taken up by actively growing roots. So what the root pruner is doing is not only devigorating our trees, but it's also invigorating our roots to make sure that they're active and highly effective in taking up nutrients. So I thought that was a really good, a simple, just practical demonstration of using a root pruner to increase our decrease vigor, but also pruning our roots to make sure that they're as healthy and as active as possible. So other things we can do to improve the function of our roots, the quality of our roots, the efficiency of nutrient uptake, is to make sure the roots are as healthy as possible by reducing the weed strip. So as we all know, you need good organic matter levels in our soil for a healthy microbial system. You do need to be controlling the weeds, for a number of reasons, picking operations, if you've got sprinklers, and also there's critical times of the cherry production, or the growth of the cherries, where they need to be having less competition with weeds, but mostly they can tolerate a few weeds. So I'm suggesting you just minimize that herbicide strip, and that's, if you've got a few weeds around here, or establishing an inter-row grass sward, that's going to be building up your organic matter levels in the soil, which is going to help stimulate microbial action, stimulate a good soil structure, stimulating good roots. The other thing we can do is we can grow organic matter out here in terms of an inter-row grass sward or whatever it is, and then we can throw it up on the mound. And that's a highly effective way of increasing organic matter onto our tree mound.